Some love confessions are unworthy of words. Some pardons are disposable of acts. Can a single decision change the course of a lifetime? Follow the epic of a hero you are going to love to hate. In the book, Dark Faïz, Book 1, Every Hero Has His Legend, from author Sandra L.Kiss. In Dark Faïz, Book 1, while the death of her mother haunts her, 18-year-old Zoe goes through a difficult period and decides to move to Los Angeles to continue her studies. Certain that she will never be able to recover from her mother's absence, the young woman sees her life turned upside down when she meets her host family, particularly Faïz, a devastatingly beautiful young man. Initially captivated by him, Zoe is quickly intrigued by his dark, tortured, and distant character. What secrets are he and his family hiding? When she discovers the truth, it's already too late. Dark Faïz, Book 1, is available on Amazon and is perfect for book clubs. Order your copy right now. Dark Faïz, Book 1, Every Hero Has His Legend, from author Sandra L.Kiss.
1. The sound signal to remind us to fasten our seatbelts pulled me out of my thoughts. Kimber Rose's voice, with the words, "I'm sorry," in my ears, failed to cover the captain's announcement that our Airbus would land in the next few minutes. That's when I saw, through my window, houses as far as the eye could see. The modern buildings stretched all the way up. I discovered a world totally different from the one I knew. We had crossed the dome without my noticing, a thin, almost invisible wall that had covered the state of California for several decades. I took a look at my seatmate, a beautiful woman in her 40s with red hair, who then smiled at me. "It's downtown," she explained, "the business district of L.A. "That's it. I'm in." I had whispered these words without even realizing it. As I turned back to my window, I realized that I had left my southern suburb of Paris for Los Angeles, a city in the United States where, for many years now, it was so difficult to get permission to stay. Part of me was getting impatient to meet my host family. Damn it. Classes start on Monday. I'll barely have time to get to know her this weekend before my first day of school. Indeed, I arrived a week late in the middle of August due to minor administrative problems with my university study contract. The Voltaire program between students and universities was an opportunity for me to go and live abroad, especially in one of the most mysterious countries in the world. My need for distance was stronger than anything else. I believed in this new beginning. At that moment, I thought of all the people I loved and left behind. Heartache made me wonder if this 3-year program was a mistake. I really hoped to get used to it and to integrate into this new country, this new city. If you need to take a transport from the airport, I recommend a shuttle or an Uber. Taxis will cost you much more," my neighbor kindly informed me. "Thank you, but someone should come and get me." I then wondered if all of the Matu family would come to meet me at the airport. As the rear axle touched the ground, I closed my eyes. Landing was still a time when I couldn't help but be anxious. With my 2 suitcases on my cart, I headed towards the exit. That was when I saw the crowd waiting in the arrivals hall, panels in hand. I looked for my first name on one of them, but without success. After a while, I almost got used to the idea of going to find out about the shuttles when I heard a voice calling out to me, "Zoe!" As I turned around, I discovered Miss Matu, who had made a small movement to retreat when she saw me. I was used to this kind of reaction due to the rare color of my eyes, which reflected an intense smaragdine green. Until now, I had only seen her once, on one of the emailed photo exchanges where Miss Matu introduced me to her family a few months earlier. This woman, with her classy and distinguished appearance, seemed humble. "Hello, Miss Matu," I said. She let out a warm little laugh. Call me Lily. That's my first name. Did you have a good trip? All right. It went pretty fast. Perfect. Let's go then. My car is in the parking lot. I'll help you with your luggage. In her light blue Mustang, Lily tried to make me as comfortable as possible. She told me about the city and its 13 million inhabitants, the habits of Californians with their cultural code, but nothing about her family, so I decided to ask her a few questions about them. Have you participated in this type of university program before? No, she confided to me with a broad smile. You know, LA is almost self-sufficient. It makes things complicated. While driving, she took a quick look at me. Suddenly, there was a hint of sadness in her voice. You're the first. She pulled herself together immediately. Don't worry, we are happy to welcome you during this school year. I think you and Victoria will get along very well. Victoria was Lily's daughter, who was 16 years old. We were nearly the same age. I knew that the Matthews also had a son, but unlike the rest of the family, I had never seen the photos exchanged. I did not have the pleasure of seeing Faïz in the family photos. Does he still live with you? Lily's smile vanished and she suddenly became very serious. Her raven black hair was long and fine, and she also had a very clear and perfect skin, like a porcelain doll. Her black eyes, so expressive, took up a large part of her face. Yes, he lives with us, most of the time. He has a loft in downtown LA. There was a moment of silence, and then she continued. My son is very discreet by nature, Zoe, and unfortunately not very talkative. I hope you can make a connection with him in the future. The tone of her voice did not leave much chance of that happening. She added, I must admit that this exchange program between universities and students makes us hesitate at first. We agreed to be a part of the host families, thinking that it would be a good way for us to be better accepted in the Baylor University community, and thus open up to other horizons. I looked through the Mustang's window. This city seemed really huge to me. Coconut palms were along the roads, and highway networks crisscrossed everywhere. In the distance, the hills seemed to surround us. The dome, on the other hand, could barely see itself, and it blended into the scenery. I was going to miss the towers of my Les Roses district. I saw myself again with Priscilla and Aurore, my two school friends, but also my neighbors, listening to hip-hop and R&B downstairs. Music and dance that most of the time turned into a guaranteed laugh. With studies, it was my daily life in Paris. Immersed in my memories for a while, the sign for Allura made me realize I had arrived in the Matthews district. I had to make a great effort not to let out a cry of surprise escape. The villas were magnificent, huge and unreal. I knew that Lily was a lawyer and Mr. Matthew was an architect. From the look of these big houses, they must have belonged to the wealthy class of Los Angeles. The neighborhood is beautiful, I said, stunned. We're not far from Calabasas. A big smile appeared again on her face, and she added, You will enjoy the view from here, between the sea and the mountains. The car stopped in front of a gate with large iron bars covered with roses and other flowers around it. I saw through it a beautiful ivory fountain, and behind it a one-floor villa with very modern architecture. Lily parked inside the courtyard, just in front of the entrance to the villa. Leave your luggage in the trunk. Mr. John will come and pick it up. Butler, that's all? Posted in front of the glass entrance door, my image was unflattering after 12 hours of flight. My bizarre hair, black, thick, and curly, was contained only by a pair of hair bows ready to explode. My usually tanned complexion was much paler than usual. Fatigue and jet lag had taken their toll on me. Even my green eyes had lost their color. Lily stood by my side, which was when I noticed her tall, slim figure. She moved around on her high heels with ease. She opened the front door. The first thing I saw was a large suitcase on one side with a glass railing. The walls were covered with paneling. Lily took me to the huge, brightly lit living room with its dazzling luxury, and all in marble with a large bay window in the background. I noticed that the lights and windows were fully automated with state-of-the-art technology. Outside, I could see, amazed, the overflow pool that ran along the terrace fitted with mosaic tiles. That's not possible. I'm still asleep. The television screen seemed to come out of the ceiling. Lily noticed my amazement and left me a little while to observe and discover the place. "Victoria!" shouted Lily. "Victoria, come down. We're in the living room." Considering the size of this villa, I wondered doubtfully how her daughter could hear her. However, a few seconds later, quick steps rushed down the stairs. Victoria appeared, 16 years old, but already very tall too, just like her mother. Her long, thin hair fell down to her shoulders. She came up to me with a radiating smile. "Hello, Zoe. I'm very happy to meet you in person," she said in English. "Sorry, but I don't speak French at all," she apologized, greeting me with a wave of her hand. "This will be an opportunity to learn, my darling," Lily told her daughter in a joking tone. "Zoe, are you coming? I'll show you around," Victoria suggested while taking a complicit look at her mother. "I'll call you about dinner, Zoe. Don't hesitate to ask if you need anything." Upstairs, a large corridor gave access to 8 huge bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms. They all had bay windows, some with ocean views and others with a view of Los Angeles, where twilight was already reflected on the city. The decorations, of a classy and refined style, made the room spacious and with a system of high technology that was found everywhere. The walls were covered with Venetian plaster. Victoria ended the tour by showing me my room. The view was incredible. With the setting sun, I had the impression I was at the edge of a cliff with the ocean as far as the eye could see. The huge bed caught my attention, seeming huge to me. The sheets and cushions were matched to the cream colors of the room. My dressing room, closed with a leather-covered door, seemed far too big for what I had brought. I noticed, surprised, that my things were already there. Victoria sat on my bed while I opened my suitcase. "You'll be fine for your first day of school on Monday?" she asked me. A part of me is a little scared. It's the first time I've been so far from home. "Don't worry, we're here. We are your new family, and—" She stopped talking, as if she had already said too much. What's the problem with that rich kid? Is he a junkie we have to hide? Victoria sighed and then continued in a low voice. "Faïz is very popular in our neighborhood, but also at university. He'll be there for you if you need him." This admission was good for me, happy to hear that the Matou's son was quite normal. My eyes lingered on Victoria, who, with her simple appearance, though not as pretty as her mother, seemed to hide a very reserved nature. "What are your origins?" she asked while staring at me. "I'm Cuban." "You are very Latin, and I noticed that you like jewelry," she deduced, pointing to my wrist with her finger. I immediately touched my bracelets with a smile, noticing that Victoria was observant. As for her, she wore no jewelry, no earrings, no necklace. Sitting on my bed, she had a simple personality, far from the golden youth of Los Angeles. This was hardly believable when you lived in a villa like this one, with its ostentatious luxury. The front door slammed violently, which made us both jump. Then we heard voices from below. "You can't just come in and decide to demolish things wherever and whenever you want." "My father," sighed Victoria, looking up to heaven. A second voice, just as irritated, that of a young man more precisely, came to us. "How would you have liked it to end? Unlike you, I can't just stand there to sit back and do nothing." Lily intervened in this heated discussion. I did not hear what she was saying, but the two men immediately calmed down. "Don't worry, it's often like that between my father and brother. They argue all the time and rarely agree on anything," Victoria tried to reassure me. "As in all families, I suppose," I said as I finished folding a t-shirt. A grin appeared at the corner of her mouth. She seemed amused by my answer, and I wondered why. At that moment, my phone in my jeans pocket rang. "My father!" I grinned. Indeed, I had completely forgotten to send him a message after landing to let him know that everything had gone well. "You can call from our phone. I think it will cost you less," Victoria suggested. "Yes, you're probably right." When I was about to call him, Lily called us from downstairs to come to dinner. "I will call him later," I decreed. I turned to the bay window. The sun had disappeared, leaving only an orange and red sky reflecting on the ocean. Those shiny waves were a magnificent spectacle. Victoria came out of my room first, adopting a nonchalant approach. As I stood in the corridor, my eyes lingered in front of a half-open door. I couldn't help but take a quick sneak peek into the insert, and then I saw a part of the room. There was someone inside, yet I hadn't heard anyone go upstairs. My eyes lingered in the door's opening, and I saw a rather masculine decor. I assume it was Faïz's room. Jackets on a rack, a desk with a white polo shirt on it. By moving a bit closer, I realized that the garment was stained by what looked like traces of blood. At that moment, a quick shadow passed behind the door, slamming it violently in my face. Confused by this reaction, I fumed. What a little prick! Without knowing him, I already hated him. In the living room, jazz music filled the room, and a wonderful smell reminded me how hungry I was. The three of them were at the table and were talking in low voices. When I arrived, Victoria and Lily shut up, and Mr. Mathieu stood up when he saw me. He was a tall, muscular man with brown hair. He came up to me, smiling. Despite his natural authority, he immediately seemed very sympathetic to me. "Hey Zoe, nice to meet you. Have you got your bearings?" He gave me a friendly kiss on the cheek. His smile illuminated his face. "Yes, everything is going very well, Mr. Mathieu. You have a very beautiful home." "Please, call me Charles. We'll spend at least one school year together after all. Come on, let's sit down." He cleared his throat before adding, "Has my son introduced himself to you?" Seated in front of Charles, who had placed his elbows on the table and joined his hands under his chin, I opted for as detached a tone as possible without showing my irritation. Lily served me salad. Not yet. I arrived only a short time ago. The meal took place in a good atmosphere. The Mathieu family told me about their professions. Lily lamented that her husband worked too much, regretting that he couldn't spend more time with his family. Victoria explained to me a basic life that was different from ours in France, on the academic level. The food was delicious. I felt tired at the end of dinner. All right, Zoe, we'll let you unpack your luggage and call your family. Don't hesitate to take the phone on the table near the entrance, Victoria told me. Thank you all, and thank you, Lily, especially for this good meal, I insisted. I decided to gather all the plates to help put away the dishes. No, leave it. Miss Arlette will take care of everything. Lily took them out of my hands. As I understood it, Miss Arlette was in charge of the Mathieu house, along with Mr. John. Upstairs, Victoria disappeared into her room after wishing me a good night. 9 hours of jet lag between Los Angeles and Paris. I preferred to leave a message for my father instead of waking him up. As I walked into my room, I heard a soft voice calling out to me behind my back. Good evening. When I turned around, I discovered Faïz Mathieu. He was standing in front of me with his hands in his pockets. Like all members of his family, he was tall, his thick black hair slightly disheveled, giving him a very mysterious look. I was surprised to see him dressed in simple white sweatpants and a t-shirt of the same color. He approached me. When he reached me, I could not turn my eyes away from his, and my heart began to beat at full speed. I had never seen a look as deep and penetrating as his, so electric, which took my breath away. His ideal physique and perfect facial features accentuated his hypnotic, almost unreal beauty. Good evening, I replied in a whisper that was barely audible. He smiled, revealing perfect teeth. Disrupted, I regained what little control I had left by trying to make the least nervous voice possible. Zoe, I introduced myself. Faïz, we'll be in the same university on Monday. If you need me to help you with your schedule or anything, don't hesitate to ask me. He bowed his head as if to better observe me. I still did not understand what was happening to me. Okay, thank you, I stammered with difficulty. I nodded at him while making an effort to try to find 2 more words to say to him, but it was impossible. Faïz frowned in a moment of doubt and then turned on his heels to get back to the stairs. Zoe, pull yourself together. I was generally unimpressive, but the feeling I felt at that moment made me angry. I absolutely had to keep control of this coming school year. When I arrived in my room, I took my toilet bag out of my suitcase, along with some pajamas. I went to my private bathroom and prepared to go to sleep. Once in my bed, I couldn't help but think about Faïz's face. It obsessed me. I finally fell into a heavy sleep. That Sunday began with storing of my luggage. Lily had asked me during yesterday's dinner if I wanted to accompany her and her daughter to church that morning. I declined the invitation politely, without explaining that my faith had been shaken for a long time. Then I started to put away my supplies, classes, and paperwork so that everything would be ready for the next day. I took a quick look at my alarm clock on the dresser and noticed that it was already late. In my shower, I saw myself again in front of Faïz, a loser, unable to start any conversation. On my way out, I put on my shorts, a wide black tank top with the portrait of Notorious B.I.G. drawn on it, and my sneakers. In front of the mirror, I pulled my long curly hair back with my pliers, which brought out my green eyes. I was feeling more like myself. At that moment, I heard the front door close again. I concluded that Lily and Victoria had just returned from church. Downstairs, I found Victoria on the terrace near the pool with her mother. I didn't see Charles or Faïz. Part of me was disappointed, which annoyed me. I'm not going to get attached to the first guy I meet in Los Angeles. Miss Arlette had prepared a hearty brunch for us, which she had set up on the large outdoor table. "Hello, Zoe. Did you have a good night? You're so cute." Lily, under her big sunglasses, had a smile that I described as magical because she conveyed a good mood all around her. "Yes, I was actually exhausted," I replied as I sat down. "I love your shorts," added Victoria. "Thank you. I hope to find more in this city." We talked about the weather and the sun of California during brunch. Everything seemed simple to them. Lily then proposed to go for a walk as soon as her husband returned to the villa. "Where did they go?" I asked in a reserved tone, speaking of Charles and Faïz. Victoria told me that her father was still at work and didn't really know what weekends were like. "Yes, it's a shame," sighed Lily. "And Faïz?" "My brother must be with Rachel right now." I gave her an interrogating look. "His girlfriend?" Victoria said in a slow voice. "Ah." I pretended not to be affected by this confession, but deep down my blood boiled. After all, what had I expected? After the hearty brunch, I went back to my room and took the opportunity to call my father. He must have been worried sick. He answered directly. "Zoe, I didn't sleep all night," he shouted immediately. "How are you? How is your host family with you?" "Dad, I'm fine," I reassured him. "You know, with the jet lag, I prefer to wait to call you. If you only knew. I'm in a beautiful villa. Allures seems to be a quiet and timeless neighborhood. The Matu family is just great." As I was talking to my father near the bay window, Victoria invited herself into my room. I nodded to her to make her settle in. She picked up the frame I had put by my bed that morning, an old picture of my mother and me together. "Dad, it's better to communicate by email. I'll call you back within the week. Kiss Grandma Dunya for me. I'm thinking of you all the time." I hung up. Victoria must not have understood anything since our conversation was in Spanish. "Is that your mother?" she asked me, brandishing the frame. I nodded. Victoria looked at the pictures and asked hesitantly, "You ever talk to her sometimes?" I was surprised by Victoria's question. I hesitated for a moment before answering her. "Only in my sleep. I find her in my dreams and it's like she never left. I can almost touch her because it feels so real to me. It's strange when I think about it." My heart tightened and Victoria didn't insist. I appreciated her discretion on the subject. Her understanding look was enough. We decided to go for a walk on the heights of Los Angeles as soon as Charles arrived at the villa in the early afternoon. We abandoned Lily's Mustang for the family's black Escalade. Through the tinted glass, I admired the landscape with its peaceful coast made of a long stretch of beaches and cliffs. The Escalade climbed up the hills to the north of the city, revealing only the low roofs of the houses below us. When we arrived at Griffith Park, almost 300 meters above sea level, west of Los Feliz Boulevard, we parked in the observatory's parking lot. This one dominated the city with a spectacular view of 360 degrees, which took my breath away. I breathed a deep breath, realizing that everything was real. In the distance, I saw on the south side the sign Hollywood in capital letters. I grabbed my smartphone to capture this moment with a photo. "You like that?" Lily asked as she approached me. "Yes, this architectural style is not common. It reminds me of a mixture between several cultures," I replied. "You have keen observation skills," said Lily. "Indeed, it is a mixture of two styles, Art Deco and Egyptian. The rendering is unique." While Charles and Victoria were walking a little further away, Lily took the opportunity to say a few words to me. "Zoe, I want you to know that if you need to confide in anyone about anything, we're here for you. You are a part of our family. This year there will inevitably be many ups and downs, and I hope very few downs." She hesitated at the end of her sentence. "Thank you, Lily. You have welcomed me so well. I know how lucky I am." She put one hand behind my back and smiled at me tenderly. "Going thousands of miles away from home has been the only way to hope to move forward in my life since my mother's death." I added, "I can imagine that. You must miss her very much." "Yes, and it was only 3 years later and on the heights of LA that I really realized it," I admitted, saddened. Lily hugged me, which comforted me more than words. We then continued the visit for a few hours with Charles and Victoria. The astrological museum in the belly of the observatory surprised me with its pedagogical approach to Earth. As dusk gradually fell on the city at the end of the afternoon, the sky began to change colors, giving a dazzling new spectacle. As I walked down to the parking lot, a bronze statue of a man looking at the horizon caught my attention. Below, it was written, "The Black Shadow." "Who is he?" I asked the 3 family members. They continued to walk in the direction of the SUV without stopping. I then perceived a certain uneasiness over them. "Black Shadow," Charles confided to me after a few seconds of silence. "He is the guardian of this city, according to its inhabitants." "Like a superhero?" I persisted. "You could say that. Who's hungry? I suggest we get some pizzas tonight," exclaimed Lily, obviously in a hurry to change the subject. Back in Alora, I sat next to Lily around the living room table. After only a few minutes, the front door opened and Faïz appeared. The latter, dressed in jeans and a white V-neck t-shirt, seemed more relaxed than last night. His intense gaze was on me. I gave him a shy and polite smile. "Good evening," he said. He went to kiss his mother's forehead. Lily gazed at him with a maternal look. He then addressed me without even looking at me. "Tomorrow I'll take you to class. We'll have to drop Victoria off at her high school first." He went to the terrace without waiting for an answer from me. That was when Lily nodded for me to follow him outside. "Go and join him," she whispered to me. "You must both get to know each other." I complied. Outside, as I approached him, my hands became sweaty. The night had fallen, leaving a fresh atmosphere in the air. I gently closed the bay window behind me. "How is Baylor University?" I began the conversation. Sitting on the bench facing the pool, Faïz remained imperturbable. Unlike him, I preferred to stand. "Well, there's everything you need. Which major did you choose?" He glanced at me. "Journalism. And you?" "International trade." He took off his shirt, showing a much more muscular torso than I'd expected, and straightened up. As he unbuttoned his jeans, I turned around by reflex, observing what the Matthews were doing in the living room. Lily and her daughter were having a peaceful conversation. Charles had simply disappeared, probably in his office upstairs. When I turned around again, I discovered Faïz in swimming shorts. "Are you coming for a swim?" he asked me, even though he already knew my answer. I cleared my throat. "Not tonight," I replied, uncomfortable in front of his nakedness. As he passed in front of me, our eyes met and his smile vanished. I decided to turn to get inside the villa. Through the reflection of the glass, I perceived an indescribable expression on his face, as if he was letting me go reluctantly. During the meal, Charles reappeared. As for Faïz, he had joined us after changing his clothes. It was the first time in 24 hours that all the members of this family were reunited, although Faïz stood back a little, very attentive to the news on television. It was reported that a gang member had been arrested for kidnapping and other barbaric acts against several people from another ethnic community. When asked, the chief of police talked about a punching operation. At the end of his interview, he thanked the mini journalist and the useful help of the Black Shadow. I noticed at that moment Charles' eyes on his son. "I have to go," Faïz said in a disillusioned tone. "Darling?" worried his mother. "I have to take a few things to my room. I'll come back tomorrow," he said, speaking to her. After wishing Victoria, Lily, and Charles a good evening, I decided to take a nice shower. Upstairs, passing in front of Faïz's room, and without knowing why, I decided to knock on his door. Part of me wanted to see him one last time. Without an answer, I allowed myself to enter without authorization. His intoxicating smell permeated the room. I touched one of his jackets with a hesitant hand. Everything was carefully tidied up, yet my gaze fell on a large closed, badly cardboard folder, which revealed a few papers. The desire to take a look at it was stronger than anything else. With my pounding heart, I looked around the room and began to consult the documents at hand. They were police reports with photos. Each one was dated and its location noted. On several of them, there were different groups of men, and the investigation summary was at the very end of the file. A face caught my attention. Impossible. The guy who had just been arrested on television was in one of the photographs. It was the same man. What was the Matthew's son doing with such documents in his possession? "Get out of here now!" exclaimed a furious voice behind me. Faïz's serious and authoritative tone froze me. I turned around slowly with a look full of questions. "I knocked. There was no one there, and—" I tried to defend myself in vain. He stood up straight, his eyes so dark that I was afraid of him. "Get out!" he barked. I rushed out of the room. As I crossed the threshold of the door, I turned around to face him. "Faïz!" He slammed the door violently, without me being able to ask him anything. Lying in my bed, angry, I asked many questions, trying to understand the information I had seen in his room. "Who are you, Faïz?" His face, his smile, his look, so difficult to support. I could describe my feelings towards him as a disturbing psychosis. The Matthew family had secrets. I could feel it. By turning around in the bed, I finally managed to find my sleep, the only time I could see and talk to my mother again. "Faïz," He held his head in his hands, pacing around in his loft overlooking downtown. Faïz felt as if he were losing control. She could have discovered everything, and this in only 24 hours, he thought. We will have to be more careful in the future. She looked so different from the others, as Achilles had described her. This time, his charm and assets would not be enough to keep this young woman away from all his secrets. He wanted to punch the wall with his fist, but he knew that the wall would not resist. He had to hold back, choosing to go and put cold water on his face to calm himself. Wiping himself with a towel, he faced his reflection in the mirror, his jaw tight. He hated himself. In his bed, Zoe's gaze filled his mind. The anger gradually gave way to a strange feeling he didn't know. A slight smile appeared on his face when he saw her dressed in that tank top with that famous wrapper drawn on it. At that moment, he thought of Rachel, the impression of betraying her overwhelming him. As a couple for more than 3 years, he had become attached to her. Yet Zoe made him feel something else. Tomorrow he would have to make the change without letting anything appear. His phone vibrated and he read the message quickly. Information to be transmitted. It was the code that Inspector Carl Barthley sent him when he needed him. He'd see him tomorrow after classes. When he closed his eyes, an incisive emerald green look invited itself into his sleep. 2. I woke up and opened my curtains wide. I will never get used to this sight, I thought, admiring the view of the ocean which seemed to rise with the sun. After a good shower, I dressed quickly with military lattice pants, open boots, and a tank top. I pulled my big bracelets on my wrist and decided to hide my long curly hair for a change. I put a scarf around my head as a bandana to contain my big hair. 2 small knocks sounded on the door. "Hi, Zoe," Victoria said. She looked at me with a certain admiration. I smiled at her and invited her to come into my room. Maybe she'd like us both to go shopping. We'd have to plan it for a weekend. It smelled like coffee and hot bread in the living room. Lily got up from the table and came to greet us. "Are you girls all right? Zoe, at this time of day, it's better to eat indoors because it's a little chilly outside. I suggest you put on a little jacket this morning when you go to class." We sat down around the table and started chatting together. Suddenly, I heard the front door open and Faïz appeared in the room. His utopian beauty bewitched me. I would have liked to remain insensitive to his charms, but it was impossible. He was in a good mood, his anger from the previous day seeming to have disappeared. He greeted me with courtesy. He sat down with us and he grabbed a slice of peanut butter toast. "Victoria, how's your chemistry presentation going this week? We can study it tonight if you want," he said. He looked at his sister protectively, and she replied with a cheerful nod. Faïz got up from his chair without saying another word and left the room. I put on my black leather perfecto before going to the Escalade where Faïz was waiting for us. Victoria sat in the back, leaving me the passenger seat. She took out her books and started to study. On the way, the radio played a series of hits. I was dying to ask him 1,000 questions, but with Victoria in the back, it was totally impossible. His fragrance filled the cabin. I smelled it discreetly. The closer we got to university, the more my anguish grew. Everyone had already known each other for a week. I sighed deeply. "You will probably see groups already formed, but it shouldn't discourage you. Be friendly and reach out to others. Everything will be fine," Faïz reassured me. I was troubled. He knew exactly what I was thinking. As the car stopped at a red light, I took a quick look at him. "Thank you," I whispered. After several dozen minutes of silent travel, we arrived in front of Victoria High School. "Good day," Victoria said as she got out of the SUV. "I'll see you tonight," I replied. Faïz left immediately. "We'll be there in a quarter of an hour," he said. I noticed that it took us almost 20 minutes to get to Victoria High School from Elora. After a few moments of death-like silence, I decided to talk to him. About last night, I wanted to apologize." "You often walk into people's rooms like that?" "No," I frowned, offended. "Actually, I just wanted to see you, and I'm telling you, I knocked first." "Why?" he grumbled. Why? Why did you want to see me?" I didn't know what to say to him. My pulse accelerated. I didn't know the answer myself. "To say goodnight," I replied shyly. "Damn it, Zoe, you couldn't have done better." Shamefully, I would have liked to disappear into the back of my seat. "Don't ever do that again," he warned me. Deep down, I tried to convince myself with conviction that it would be the only time. We finished the journey in silence. Faïz disappeared into his thoughts, his mood dark again. Baylor University was written big on the building in front of us. Its Romanesque revival style made the building imposing. The neat architecture with its bucolic appearance embellished by countless statues dominated a gigantic campus. A few meters further on, I saw a church. It was really strange that the two buildings mixed in this different environment. In front of the university entrance, Faïz regained the use of his voice. "Send a message if there is any trouble. Don't hesitate, okay?" "I can also run. I haven't changed my phone package yet. I was planning to solve that problem within the week." I grinned. "All right, then you'll have to run fast." Before turning around, he winked at me. It didn't take more than that for me to find myself on a little cloud. I was looking forward to meeting him after school. Inside the amphitheater, the social science course had not yet begun. Standing near the entrance, I was reassured I'd go completely unnoticed. It was swarming with people with voices from all over. A real artistic mess. I did not settle down too close or too far from the stage. When I was setting my things out on the table, I accidentally dropped my binder on the floor. As I bent down to pick it up, beautiful long red nails gave it back to me. "Are you new here?" Sparkling and amused eyes questioned me. "Yes," I said, so happy to introduce myself to someone. "I'm Asaris Anderson. I'm from New York." "Zoe Reyes." "You wear contacts, don't you?" She interrupted me. The question must have burned her lips. "No, it's my true color," I told her, used to this assumption. "Incredible," she breathed in amazement. "Where are you from?" "Paris, France." "Paris!" she shouted with a big smile. "Yes, I am here with the university exchange program." Asaris, with a dream physique and African-American origins, had light hazelnut eyes that made her eyes very special. Her dark lipstick seemed to be her only makeup on her perfect, flawless, matte complexion. Standing in front of me, she looked tall. Her curved silhouette was like an hourglass. She dressed in a chic and sober style at the same time. With a wave of her hand, she called another girl at the end of the amphitheater to join us. "Zoe, this is Alexia." Asaris turned to her friend and added, "She comes from Paris, and those are not contacts," she said, thus taking the lead on possible reoccurring questions. I couldn't help but smile. Great, a French woman, exclaimed the young woman, apparently happy with this news. You can call me Lexi, she added. I'm from Bordeaux. Did you also come with the program? She asked me. That's right, I said. Osiris looked at her friend with a smile. Like you, Lexi, you two have a lot in common. Lexi had a slightly rounded silhouette and was of medium height. Her large black eyes were highlighted by a light line of eyeliner, which in turn highlighted her light complexion. Her long caramel-streaked hair fell to her shoulders. Her glamorous, simple look gave her a crazy sex appeal. I'll get my things and come and sit next to you, Zoe, between French. As she walked away, she stuck her tongue out to Osiris. This gave her a false angry look as she took her place in front of me, which made me smile. The social science teacher made his entrance. During the class, Lexi briefed me on this year. She told me about the prerequisite courses, the 2 semesters for the first cycle, but also about the general atmosphere in the seminars. I listened to her while taking notes on her morning course. After 3 hours in the amphitheater, the bell rang. Immediately, the books closed and the voices began to rise again. Osiris got up and joined us to continue questioning me. The 3 of us headed for the exit while we were talking. What part of LA are you in? Alora. They both looked at each other at the same time and exclaimed, Oh my God, are you serious? That is one of the most popular neighborhoods, added Lexi, excited. I don't always realize my luck, I told them. Lexi, where are you? It's not bad either, Osiris continued. Yeah, it's nice too. It's downtown, Piero residence. Well, it's not Alora, so be careful. It's a huge residence with all the services we need. You have no reason to go out anymore, except to go to class, Osiris said. Before leaving the place, she added, And you don't have a host family. Your parents bought your apartment for the duration of your studies. Their smiles suddenly froze at the sight of Faïz, who was waiting for me outside. These girls, so relaxed and talkative, became mute in front of his dark, intense eyes. I blushed, surprised that he was there. Everything went well? He hastened to ask me, staring at me with his piercing eyes. Breathless, I forced myself to breathe deep. My new friends, on the other hand, moved slightly away to give us some privacy. Yes, the morning went well, I confided to him. He looked at my friends with questioning eyes. This is Osiris and Alexia. We're in the same classes, I explained to him. The girls nodded shyly and courteously. I'll wait for you after school to take you home, Faïz said to me. By the way, I won't have the 2 hours of classes at the end of the day today that I normally have, so Osiris and Lexi asked me to take a little tour of LA before taking me back to Alora. Faïz frowned. He put a hand in his hair as if to think, taken aback. He asked me, Are you sure you're going to be okay? I could take some time to show you the city this weekend, if you really want. I was torn at the thought of saying no, but deep down it was clear that it was out of politeness that he was offering to take me. Faïz, I have to fit in here. You encouraged me this morning in the car. I think this is the opportunity, I pointed out to him. The features of his face softened. He is so beautiful, I thought at that moment. He nodded, understanding, and walked away, continuing on his way through the university hallway. The girls jumped me. That guy is hot, Zoe. Is he your darling? Asked Lexi. No, he's Faïz, the son of my host family. My whisper piqued their curiosity. You seem to have him completely under your skin, insinuated Osiris. We resumed our march towards the cafeteria. I've only known him for 2 days, and most of the time, he annoys me, I said in an angry tone. You blushed as soon as you saw him, Zoe, Lexi insisted, not convinced by my words before continuing. If I were in your shoes, I'd trap him in a corner of the house and give him a party. Osiris looked up to heaven and finally came to my rescue. You're sick, Lexi, and Zoe may already have someone? At that moment, my 2 friends stared at me with insistence. Thanks, Osiris. It's a lot worse now. I had no desire to tell them that my only love adventure had been in 6th grade and that it had lasted a week and 2 days. Really, nothing extraordinary. He's the one who has someone, I said in a dry tone in order to have peace. Dismayed by my answer, they pretended to be done with Faïz. All 3 of us took our seats in the campus cafeteria and began our meal while having a lively discussion. After a few moments, a group of about 10 girls entered the room and settled down not far from our table. Surprised by their so chic style from another era, I stared at their long flowered skirts and their trousers, which were reminiscent of the hippie period. Some were wearing long braids, while others wore headbands. Their jewelry further accentuated the style. I focused for a moment on these young women. What is that? I asked my 2 sidekicks in a low voice, amazed. Osiris sighed, apparently annoyed by this small group. Even I don't understand, she growled. They look like Mormons from a television series, I insisted. I call them scouts, Lexi added, amused. At that moment, the woman who seemed to be the group leader turned to us and stared with a scornful look in her steel blue eyes. Her headband was spilling her blonde, smooth hair backwards. She was dressed in a broad, shapeless, pastel-colored lace dress which did not suit her. Damn it, Lexi, you couldn't have kept your voice down? Whispered Osiris, mad with rage. Oh my God, Barbie is coming towards us, exclaimed Lexi, excited. She tried to smother a wild, nervous laugh with her hands. Still under the shock of this Baroque character, it was impossible for me to take my eyes off her. The young woman came towards us with a step that was both confident and graceful. Underneath her cheeky, hippie looks, her doll's face showed a certain beauty. When she reached us, she looked down at the 3 of us in silence. I leaned over to my 2 friends. Do you think she'll sing us a musical? I whispered. Shut up, you idiots, said the young woman in front of us. We were speechless and confused by her words. The atmosphere in the cafeteria had become icy. She's vulgar, the scout, on top of everything, added Lexi, once the shock had passed. I never thought I'd be put in my place by this kind of character. Shaking my head to get my mind back, I could not contain myself anymore and burst out laughing while protesting. Excuse me, we don't know each other, and you've come to our table and insulted us. Are you sure things are going well up there? You are new, and you're passing judgment on people you know nothing about, she roared in a threatening voice. This fury is as bad as a cheerleader. Pointing her threatening finger at us, she added, If I were you, I'd stay quietly in my place. We can make the year impossible for you. It will be a real nightmare. Her blue eyes were as cold as her voice. We were the spectacle of the cafeteria. No one dared to flinch in front of these young authoritarian women. And to think that I'd wanted a discreet start to the school year. You had to admit that was ruined. When you have finished revising your play with a tragic destiny, can you let us finish our meal? Osiris said with great disdain, far from impressed by the threats. Our angry red opponent squinted. She finally turned on her heels and left as gracefully as she had come. No doubt we had just started a war. Frankly, girls, I would have preferred a musical, I confessed in an annoyed tone, stabbing a little vegetable on my plate with my fork. They're worse than a gang, this group, Lexi said. How do we know they don't have an M16 hidden in their petticoats? Under her farm Barbie appearance, she might actually be Chucky, the crazy doll. Despite the tense situation, that still made us laugh. Our literature course had just ended. By mid-afternoon, the three of us were gathered in the campus parking lot near Osiris's red Bentley. I looked over the parking lot. What are you looking for, Zoe? Osiris asked. Faïz has probably already left. I can't see his car, I answered. As we were about to get into the convertible, a black BMW X6 stopped in front of us, and a male voice called out, Hey girls, what are you doing? Two young men were sitting at the front seats. The driver revved the engine. Baden, Lucas! Shouted Osiris, apparently happy to see them. She turned to me. Guys, this is Zoe. She arrived today. She's from Paris. Hello, Elsmeralda, the driver kindly shouted to me. I'm Bowden. I looked at the second one, who waved to greet me. And you are Lucas, I guessed. Yes, madame. We're going to Venice Beach to skate. You want to come? Suggested Bowden. Lexi turned to us, putting her hands together and begging us to accept. I had noticed that she was literally eating Lucas with her eyes. Osiris looked at me, and I accepted without hesitation. We'll meet you there, Osiris told them. The BMW went off in a hurry, and Lexi jumped up and down on the spot, clapping her hands. Osiris looked up to the sky. It's about time you made a move, Lexi, since you've been hanging around together. How long has it been? I asked Osiris. A week, she confessed to me. Only 1 week? Is this a joke? I asked. I climbed into the back of the Bentley while Osiris laughed. When it started, Taylor Swift's voice invaded the car's speakers. We left, singing at the top of our lungs, our hair in the wind towards the beach. Wilshire Boulevard was endless. After swallowing many kilometers and waiting in traffic jams, Osiris finally turned off the engine in the Venice parking lot. We could already hear music coming from the beach in the distance. There are groups that settle here and play all day, Lexi explained to me. There are a lot of them, especially on weekends. A real open-air museum. She immediately looked for Baden's car. There they are, she exclaimed, waving her arms at them. Venice Beach offered a permanent spectacle where painters, musicians, and many other communities rubbed shoulders. I looked all around. There were more or less atypical people with a diverse culture. The cult of the body and beauty seemed to take an important place here. Lexi walked in front of us with Lucas, laughing foolishly with them. Baden, skateboard in hand, began a conversation with me. So, Zoe, how was your first day? At my side, I realized how big he was, with square shoulders and an imposing build. His short, brushed hair gave him an almost military look. I'm happy to have met the girls. I was apprehensive about that first day. I confided in him. Do you sleep on campus like Osiris? No, Osiris said. Zoe follows the same program as Lexi. However, she is with the host family. A group of dancers surrounded us. One of them had a Bluetooth speaker in his hands that played a hip-hop beat. "The later the night gets, the better the atmosphere," Bauden shouted in my ears to make himself heard in the middle of all the noise. After a few minutes of the show, the dancers walked away with a good-natured atmosphere. I then resumed the conversation by addressing Osiris. "I didn't know you lived on campus." "I live with the Alpha Mu sorority. I just finished my rush period." She went through her bag and proudly showed us her brown t-shirt. Her sorority's signature was marked with a yellow letter. "You'll get us into your VIP parties," I said, smiling. "I intend to do that," she said, replying with a broad smile. Osiris then addressed Bauden. "Zoe's looking for a job on campus. As captain of Baylor's football team, maybe you could play your connections." Bauden thought for a moment before saying, "In the cafeteria, they're looking for someone to help David with the service. I'll go and find out tomorrow," he promised. We stopped in front of an oil painting stand. The painter was focused on his work. I admired it, with its magnificent landscapes that seemed so real. One of his paintings caught my attention. You could see the rooftops of Los Angeles bathed in sunset. In the foreground on one of the roofs was a silhouette that could be seen from behind. Its immense shadow covered the city. There was something melancholy about this disturbing painting. "It's the Black Shadow," Osiris whispered to me. "A legend of this city," Bauden told me. "I heard about it yesterday on the news. Do you think it really exists?" I said. "No one can say for sure. It's an urban legend. The man is supposed to save us from the end of the world," Osiris replied. "You mean like a modern-day hero?" I insisted. The mystical old man holding the stand stopped painting and turned to us. "The fire of hell cannot reach him. It is in darkness that we can meet him." At that moment, I wondered if the old man was talking about the Black Shadow or the evil Osiris had referred to. We finished our walk on a crowded skating rink. Lucas and Bauden rushed to it. That was when Lexi approached me. "In Venice, skating is a religion. It's not for nothing that this place has the reputation of being the world capital of roller skating," she explained to me. "We're between Marina del Rey and Santa Monica," added Osiris, pointing to the Ferris wheel in the distance. Indeed, as if it were a mirage behind the mist of the waves, I saw an amusement park, which gave the impression of floating on the water. The sun was coming down. I took a quick look at my watch. It was getting late. I borrowed Osiris's cell phone to call Lily to alert her that I was leaving the beach. "I'm going to stay with Bauden and Lucas for a while," Lexi told us. "No problem. We'll call you tonight," Osiris said, to let her know that she would like to know everything about the end of her friend's evening. "Is that where you live?" Osiris opened her eyes wide, visibly dazzled by the large villa, like I was for the first time. "Don't worry, I'll show you around," I promised her. "And then you'll have to get me out of there by force." We burst out laughing. "I had a great day. Thank you, Osiris." "I'll see you tomorrow." As I got out of the car, I saw Faïz leaving the villa and coming to meet me. "You better make a move, Zoe, or I'll take care of him," Osiris threatened me. From afar, she greeted Faïz and left immediately. I tried to guess his mood as I approached him, but tonight he seemed impenetrable. "I thought you'd come home sooner," he said. I didn't notice the time pass with Lexi and Osiris. I didn't want to mention the name of Bauden and his friend, feeling that this was not the right time. He took off the jacket he was wearing and put it around my shoulders. I didn't realize until then that I had left my perfecto in Osiris's Bentley. Touched by this attention on his part, I wanted to throw my arms around his neck, but I held back. His suede jacket smelled like his cologne, which intoxicated me. I hugged him tightly so that his scent got into all the pores of my skin. "Thank you," I whispered. Standing in front of him, I stared at him intently. Caught unawares, an unexplainable frustration crossed his eyes. "We should go home," he said softly. Once my mind was in order, I started breathing again. Completely disturbed by my irrational thoughts, we returned to the villa. During dinner, I reassured Lily as best I could. I suspected she had been worried about me all day. When I told of my meeting with Lexi and Osiris, she breathed a sigh of relief. From the corner of my eye, I watched Faïz on the sly. Something seemed to bother him. I would have liked to see him smile even once during the meal, but that didn't happen. Miss Arlette cleared the table, which had emptied itself of all its people. Charles had gone to his office. Victoria had already gone to her room, while I finished watching the news in the living room, curious to know if they were going to talk about this mysterious hero again, the famous Black Shadow. Suddenly, Lily's pleading murmurs outside the front door, trying to convince Faïz not to go to his appointment, caught my attention. "Not tonight, please, honey. He can't just ask that of you." "The others are too far away, and you know the situation is becoming urgent." "When will all this end?" The emotion in Lily's voice overwhelmed me. "It hasn't even started yet. I have to go now. Don't make things more complicated," he insisted. I approached the front door. Faïz took his mother in his arms and hugged her affectionately. What secret could this family have been hiding? Under this warm atmosphere, I felt in each of them a hint of sadness, anxiety, and a bit of darkness. When Lily came back to the living room, she hid her wet eyes behind a wide smile, but the sorrowful features of her face betrayed her. "Lily, are you all right?" I asked, worried. "It's nothing," she tried to convince me. "I wish I could help you. If I could get an explanation of what's going on." She came closer to me. I felt she wanted to talk to me, but after a few seconds of hesitation and an inner fight, she pulled herself together. "Zoe, was there something you wanted to say to me? What was it about?" This sudden change of subject disarmed me. I would like to take a job on campus." "Why?" she replied, frowning. "It's going to be too much with your classes. Let us help you financially. We can afford it." "I know, but I'm very independent by nature. I need to fly on my own." Lily looked pleasantly surprised. She nodded and added, "I understand, but if you ever feel that it's too hard to keep up with both, you stop immediately. We're here for you, no matter what." "Okay," I reassured her. "However, I will not have the same hours as Faïz or Victoria. I'll take the bus for the trips when necessary." "No," objected Lily. "You'll take my car. Do you have your license?" "Yes, only since this summer, but I assure you I don't need it." "I prefer that you take it," insisted Lily. "Taking the bus in the evening is not recommended here. I prefer to know you are safe." "Okay, well, thank you." I took her in my arms. I wanted to comfort her so much. What was happening? I didn't know. I prepared to go to bed, tired from my first day in Baylor, when I saw a box on my dresser near my bed. Inside it, I discovered a brand new Samsung smartphone. A small note had been carefully placed next to it. "Now you can call. Faïz." My heart tightened, touched by this gesture. I could finally get some news from the people I loved. Quickly, I started transferring all the numbers from my old phone to the new one. When I opened my contacts, Faïz's number appeared. He had already entered it. I allowed myself for a brief moment to hope for what my unconscious wanted most before my reason took charge of suffocating my feelings. Next week went by at full speed. The main occupation of the students in Baylor that Friday was to prepare for the weekend. The addresses of the parties were exchanged by text messages or social networks. Bowden had managed to get me the job at the campus cafeteria. I shared the service with David, another student who had trained me in the position over the past few days. At first sight, he's shy by nature, but the feelings were perfect between us. Complicity had even developed over the days. David had gestures and an often clumsy speech that made him endearing. His great passion was computer science. He could talk for hours about programs or software that I didn't understand anything about. I defended him often. He was a little different from the others and was mocked a lot in public. How could anyone demean a person who did not fit the criteria of a golden youth? As soon as I could, I flew to his rescue by taking his place behind the cash register. Within a few days, we had become inseparable friends. Even though David was a year younger, he was now part of our small friend group. Lily had asked me to invite my girlfriends over during the weekend or in the evening after courses. They were welcome in Elora. Lexi and Lucas became inseparable. Despite a relationship between them which was obvious to us all, they weren't making anything official yet. I spent a lot of time with Victoria. I liked her naturalness, her character. We could spend hours together in our rooms talking about everything. Osiris had a party on Saturday evening with her sorority, and she insisted that I be present at this event. I had no choice but to accept. Taking advantage of the beautiful day, we took our lunch break outside on the campus. Bowden was talking football with David, while Osiris was talking with a friend from New York by FaceTime. I hadn't seen Faïz since that Monday evening. When I asked Victoria about him, she told me that he had a lot of work to do, but that he would try to come to the villa over the weekend. I hadn't seen him in the halls of the university either. It must be said that the institution was huge and our schedules were different. Yet he always invaded my thoughts. "That look, he means everything," Lexi teased. I didn't hear her coming towards me. "What are you talking about?" I defended myself. "I'm thinking about tomorrow's party. I was hoping that my diversion would be effective. Unfortunately, my new friends were getting to know me. Indeed, my emotions were getting harder and harder to hide." "You go on the defensive every time we talk about him, Zoe," added Osiris, who had just hung up with her friend. "You never wanted to open his bedroom closet, breathe his shirts, or touch his underwear?" Lexi continued with her twisted mind. I sighed deeply as I felt the conversation deviate from its path. Fortunately, Lexi changed the subject in a hurry. "Hey, before I came to join you, I ran into Barbie and her gang," she laughed. "I can assure you that if their eyes were bullets, I would already be dead by now. It seemed like they wanted to kill me." "Lexi, you spend your time provoking them with your sneaky smile? That's normal, and you know, they are numerically superior. You must not forget it," Osiris replied. "These girls, they are real pests. Osiris is right. We must not play their game, even if I admit that they drive me crazy," I added. They spend their time staring down at us from above, especially Barbie. She's the worst. I can't stand her, Osiris said. The bell began to ring, telling us that it was time to go back to our courses. David left first on his own. I'd see him later in the cafeteria. In the corridors of the university, Faïz was still not to be found. I could not hide my disappointment. The trade course passed slowly. Our teacher, Miss Kalinsky, recited his speech in a monotonous way, which just made the last few hours sleepy. Around me, I saw more than one sleep dive. I forced myself to stay focused. A lot of evaluations were waiting for us next week. I would absolutely have to study as much as possible that weekend. It was true that my work in the cafeteria did not help me, but it was essential. I had survived that first week, and even better, I had appreciated it. With the girls, we hurried out on campus. They accompanied me to the cafeteria. After a few steps in the open air, I stopped suddenly. In the distance, I recognized Faïz, who was coming to meet us. "Your boyfriend is here," shouted Lexi. I gave her a quick, murderous look. They started walking a few meters behind me, leaving me with a semblance of privacy. My two sidekicks didn't seem to want to miss a thing in our conversation. "Are you all right?" Faïz asked me once he reached me. "I'm fine. I haven't seen you in a week." Embarrassed, he preferred to look away. "I had a lot of things to deal with," he finally said. "Did you need me?" "No, but..." I was about to finish my sentence when I heard a female voice calling Faïz in the distance. I looked around to see who it was. At the time, I thought it was a joke, not believing what I was seeing. Horror, the plague that was nicknamed Barbie and many other names, was coming towards us. Everything happened very quickly in just a few seconds. I saw her throw herself around Faïz's neck, happy to see him, and then gave him a light kiss on the lips. "Baby, I was looking for you," she whispered in his ear, her face gently radiating with happiness. I looked at Faïz, then Barbie, then Faïz. God, no! She was Rachel. What a nightmare! Behind me, I heard whispers full of fear, rising in intensity. My friends were watching this bad scene as if they were watching a TV reality show. All they needed was some popcorn. "Rachel, do you know Zoe?" asked Faïz, apparently embarrassed by the situation. "She's been living with my parents for almost a week." Rachel seemed surprised by the words. "We know each other in a certain way. She and her friends nicknamed me Doubleface around the university," she whispered, with hatred in her eyes. Bitch, I was getting ashamed. "No, your first approach wasn't... You misunderstood." I tried to defend myself. "I think it would be better if you both got to know each other," Faïz advised us, staring at me severely as if he was discovering another side of me. Then he looked at Rachel again, and nothing seemed to exist for him anymore. I was on the verge of a heart attack, disgusted by what seemed like a big joke to me. He finally turned around to me. I stared at him, completely lost. At that moment, he felt a certain uneasiness towards me. Rachel, feeling her beloved escaping from her, took him by the hand and pulled him slightly towards her. "Baby, let's go. Remember, we have to spend the evening together, just the two of us." She gave me a look of victory that was the final punch to knock me out. "Zoe, see you later," Faïz said in a low voice. Still in shock, I did not answer. The discussion ended there. They both walked away together, hand in hand. Suddenly, the two faces of my friends appeared in front of me, reminding me of reality. "What the hell is this?" Lexi shouted. "Tell me this is a bad joke, girls. Did you see what I saw?" I said, still dazed. "After reflection, I advise you never to rummage through his drawers, or even his wardrobe, Zoe," Lexi replied, shaking her head before adding, "God knows what you might find inside." "Why her? Anyone, but not her. I am cursed," I grunted, desperate. Osiris and Lexi each took me by the arm, and we resumed our walk towards the cafeteria. "Thank you, girls, for your comfort," I said in a gloomy tone. "If we're holding you, it is mainly to prevent you from running under the first car you might see," Osiris explained to me. "Oh, you're exaggerating." David looked at me with a worried eye. "This is not the time, Dave. Zoe has just been stamped. Give her a good drink," Lexi continued, always with the greatest exaggeration. "Lexi, instead of bullshitting, let's sit down and let Zoe work," sighed Osiris, annoyed. "Will you be all right?" she asked me, anxious. Osiris always had the right words at the right time. I nodded in response. My two friends went to sit in a corner of the cafeteria while David tapped the counter with his fingertips, waiting for an answer to a question he hadn't even asked yet. Faced with my silence, he crossed his arms, which indicated to me that he was getting impatient. I then decided to confide in him. "It's Faïz," I said in a whisper. "I knew you had a crush on this guy," he replied, raising his arms to the sky. "So tell me, what's going on with him?" "He's been in a relationship for some time with a girl named Rachel, and I just discovered that this Rachel is actually Barbie." "Oh no, I am not buying that. Come on, stop messing with me. What's the real problem?" I stared at him discouraged. He understood then that I wasn't kidding. "You mean Baylor's hottest Apollo is sending his time with that?" "Be careful. I knew he had someone, but looking at reality was a real slap in the face. You should have seen her, so proud and happy to humiliate me." David left in a hurry to take orders. The earth had not stopped turning. As I watched David, I noticed that he had changed his clothes. "Do you have an appointment?" I asked. I wasn't going to let him get away with it so easily. "I confided in you. Your turn, Dave." "Okay, it's Morgan. No one knows about us. Thank you for keeping the information to yourself," he whispered as he continued his service. "You can trust me." I pretended to lock my mouth with the key. He thanked me with a little wink. Osiris and Lexi came to the counter to tell us goodbye. It was time for them to go home. "I'll see you at the party. I am counting on you," Osiris added, pointing to all three of us. She then walked away towards the exit, repeating to me to be brave and not to let myself go. "Wait for me," Lexi shouted at her, running behind her. "It's too dangerous for you out there." She hurried. "Dangerous? No, the Black Shadow watches over this city," Osiris replied confidently. They disappeared in the distance, only their laughter reaching us. At that moment, I noticed that the cafeteria had almost emptied. I took the opportunity to exchange a few words with David. "Do you believe in the Black Shadow?" "Of course. Everyone in LA believes in him. He's more than just a legend, Zoe," he replied. "What the hell is he?" Who is he? That would go back several decades. While Los Angeles had its highest rate of banditry, someone decided to take matters into their own hands to stop the escalation of violence. We don't know if he acts alone or if there are several of them, but in a few years, the city became one of the safest in the United States. Pelican Bay State Prison in Del Norte County was built to house California's biggest criminals. This prison is reputed to be the safest in the world and inviolable. The Black Shadow is at the root of most of these arrests, and the police continue to use him for all major cases. Why do they call him the Black Shadow? Simply because you can walk down the street and suddenly see a big shadow moving next to you. So you look around or look up and see that there is no one there. The shadow has simply disappeared. He watches over each of us. You who want to become a journalist, maybe one day you will have the privilege of writing an article about him. Anyway, I wish you the best. David wandered off. I'd hung on to every word, fascinated by his story. The people of Los Angeles believed strongly in this character and worshipped him, yet no one wanted to know more. The inhabitants had a hero and nothing else mattered to them. Good evening. A young man with a matte complexion and light eyes came to the counter. His natural charisma and elegant physique did not go unnoticed. Is David here? He asked politely. I looked around, but I didn't see him. He must have gone to the back. I'll go get him, I replied to the young man. You are Morgan. After the surprise, I gave him a big smile, happy to meet him. I went to the back of the cafeteria, finding David putting away milk cartons. Morgan is here, I happily told him. Damn, he's early. I'm not finished yet. Leave it. I'll take care of it. Go to your appointment, I ordered him. Thank you, Zoe. He hugged me and went to join his friend. The day ended. After calculating the cash register and taking care to close the cafeteria, I went out into the open air and took a deep breath. It had gotten dark without me noticing. I rushed to the dimly lit campus parking lot to pick up Lily's Mustang. I was looking forward to going home and finding the Mathieu family in my room. The place was deserted on that Friday evening. Baylor, emptied of all its population, had a completely different face. The darkness covered every corner with a mysterious silence. I could hear my footsteps echoing on the concrete when suddenly the dull echo of other footsteps called out to me. I turned around, but saw no one. Cloudiness was my only company. Fear seized me, and an alarm signal instinctively coursed through my body. Don't give in to paranoia, Zoe. It's nothing. I accelerated my pace until I ran the last few meters to my car. Once inside, I immediately locked the doors. My pulse was beating very fast, and I couldn't catch my breath. When I turned the ignition on, the Mustang refused to start. I didn't insist for fear of drowning the engine. The panic shook my guts. I felt a presence there, very close to me. I could hear the footsteps approaching, but I couldn't see anything in the dark. I grabbed my phone from the bag, trying to make my brain work, paralyzed by fear. Osiris lived the closest. I had difficulty dialing her number, but after several rings she didn't answer. I eliminated Lexi, who was too far away. David had already left. I pinched the bridge of my nose to think, Faïz. Without thinking any further, I decided to call him. Zoe? He answered immediately in a deep voice. I burst into tears. The car isn't starting. There's someone following me. I don't know what's going on. Don't move, he ordered me, worried by the sound of my voice. I am coming. He hung up immediately without me being able to add anything. 18 minutes later, squeaks of tires rang out in the university alley. A black McLaren parked next to me. Faïz stepped out of the car, and when I saw him, a swell of emotion seized me. When he opened the door, he came to sit in the passenger seat, and I threw myself into his arms, so relieved. It was the first time I'd been pressed against him. The strength of his chest surprised me. Once my calm returned, Faïz pulled me away from him and took me by the shoulders, observing me attentively. "Did someone hurt you?" he asked, trying to contain his rage. His black eyes made me guess how dangerous he could be if something bad happened to someone around him. I began to tell him what had just happened, how I had felt. He stroked my cheek. This gesture comforted me and burned my flesh at the same time. Faïz then called his mother to warn her of my delay, failing to tell her about the incident that had just happened. It was no use worrying Lily more than necessary. Then he walked through the parking lot, certainly looking for a prowler, but saw no one. He took a look at my vehicle and managed to get it started without too many problems. "I'll take you back with my car," he said. I sat in his car with its sophisticated interior and absolute luxury. Faïz's scent floated inside. When he came to sit behind the wheel, I felt a sense of security and comfort. All my uneasiness disappeared instantly. "I'm sorry about your evening with Rachel," I lied. I had a feeling he didn't believe a word of my apology. He started at full speed towards Allura. "The main thing is that nothing happened to you." "Will you stay at the villa tonight?" I asked, worried. "Not tonight. I have a lot of things to take care of." My heart tightened at the thought of him leaving to find her again. I turned my face towards the window and contemplated the landscape that was scrolling by my window. I didn't want to meet his eyes, as I didn't have the strength to pretend anymore tonight. My batteries were completely drained. "She went home." "She went home," Faïz confessed to me without me asking him for an explanation. I suspected him of wanting to calm my thoughts so that I could have a more serene evening. "Good," I whispered, without embarrassing myself about this news. I felt his gaze weighing on my back. He sighed as if he wanted to add something, but changed his mind. We arrived at Allura, both silent. Faïz escorted me to the front door to make sure that I was safe from any danger. "You're going back right now?" I hastened to ask him. "Don't worry about me. It's okay. I have to get the Mustang back. Try to rest, Zoe. After all these emotions, you must be exhausted." I approached him and slipped him a sweet kiss on his cheek. He didn't reject me. He stood straight in front of me, destabilized by my gesture, then turned on his heels, fleeing the moment that seemed to have stopped. I realized I was falling in love with a very mysterious man with impenetrable thoughts, and moreover, who was already in a relationship. Faïz arrived at the top of the building on West 5th Street overlooking Los Angeles. The night gave the city a beauty very different from that of the day. He had his hands in his pockets and his face partly hidden under his black hood, which allowed no one to be able to read his eyes. Deep inside, Faïz told himself that he wished he'd never met her. He, who had always protected himself from his feelings by maintaining strict control over each of his emotions, was now left to his own devices about how he felt about the young woman. Her face, her smile, and her green eyes obsessed him. He had been afraid for her tonight, forced to turn down a more than disappointed Rachel to go to Zoe's rescue. He then wondered what had happened on campus. Faïz clenched his fist, trying to convince himself that it was just a coincidence. There was no way the traveler could already be on her trail when he had just arrived in the city. If that was the case, then Zoe was in danger. He recognized Inspector Barthy's steps behind him, noting that he was accompanied by 2 other people. Faïz did not bother to turn around. "Do you have any news?" he asked the inspector. "The moment we feared has arrived. He came back," Barthy said in a nervous voice. Faïz remained silent and sighed deeply. The disturbingly prophecy that Callis spoke of was coming true. He turned slowly to face the inspector. His face was tired, and his white hair had a particular light that was almost translucent. Of medium build, his silhouette was no less athletic. His physique remained well-balanced for his size. Next to him was a smaller Asian man with long hair. In the back, he saw a tall woman, very slim with mahogany hair. Her pale skin brought out her lips in blood red. Their sport outfits indicated that there were people on the ground. "This is Zorik," the little man nodded. "And this is Belize." The woman stepped forward. "I don't need anyone to help me, especially not an average person," Faïz protested. "The FBI is on our case. We have no choice. Zorik and Belize will have to report on the situation to the government in a few months." The inspector replied. "You put them in danger," Faïz said to him. "They can be world champions of karate or martial arts, but that will not be enough. It is evil itself that is at the gates of the city. Wherever he passes, there will only be chaos and desolation." "Your grandfather couldn't beat him on his own," Barthy replied, raising his voice. "Do you really want it to end the same way? He lost the woman he loved out of pride, refusing the help he was offered. Is that what you want to do?" Faïz did not want to sacrifice anyone, and knew full well that the man was right. He could use hands, eyes, soldiers. This time, his exceptional strength would not be enough. He would have to live up to the legacy left by his grandfather and protect the City of Angels at the cost of his life. He realized that tonight's incident with Zoe was not a coincidence. The traveler was going to want to take everything that mattered to him, leaving him no choice but to move away from her, but also from his family. "Gather as many Levithians as you can. We will need them to contain the city against evil and avoid a coup d'etat," Faïz concluded. Without adding another word, he walked towards the stairs. The inspector did not have time to say anything else. The young man had already evaporated in the darkness. The master of horror, nicknamed Maestro, had decided to return among the simple mortals, but also among these men, the Leviathans like Faïz, who were considered here to be demigods. To be continued.